a forensic blood spatter analyst who spent 8 seasons building a system so clean that the homicide detective sitting 10 feet away never got close, against a Marine Corps veteran turned professional hitman who spent years killing people for money while hiding in plain sight inside of a Los Angeles acting class. HBO's Barry ran from 2018 to 2023. It was created by Bill Hader and Alec Berg, ran for 4 seasons and 32 episodes, and follows Barry Berkman, a former US Marine who served in Afghanistan. After accidentally killing an innocent civilian during military service, Barry's life began to unravel, and then he was groomed by his handler, Monroe Fuches, into a life as a contract killer. The show won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards over its run. Everything in this breakdown draws from the HBO show only. Showtime's Dexter ran from 2006 to 2013. Everything here draws from those 8 original seasons. The important thing to understand about Barry Berkman going into this comparison is that he is not a clean operator. He is not precise. He is not patient. He is a man with serious PTSD, expert-level combat training, and a habit of making catastrophic emotional decisions that destroy everything around him, including himself. Dexter's system was built for patience and control. Barry's was built for speed and lethality. These 2 approaches are not equal, and the gap between them matters more than it looks. Dexter Morgan was a forensic blood spatter analyst at Miami Metro PD. His method followed a specific sequence across all 8 seasons. He gathered information on a target using his legitimate access to police databases and case file. He then surveilled that target long enough to map out a window, a moment when the target was isolated, predictable, and reachable. Dexter typically incapacitated victims with a sedative before transporting them to a prepared kill room. Plastic sheeting, a table, a controlled space he had set up in advance. He often collected blood slide trophies from ritualized kills and disposed of bodies in the ocean. The whole thing was disciplined, structured, and almost impossible to detect because he built it to be. Barry Berkman worked completely differently. The series implies a very large body count accumulated over years of contract killing, and his approach was not about control, it was about capability. He was a Marine Corps veteran who served in Afghanistan, earned a rifle expert badge and a pistol expert badge, and was described in the show as demonstrating near impossible marksmanship. He could engage targets from hundreds of yards away. Up close, he received standard Marine Corps hand-to-hand training. He moved fast, moved with certainty in the moment, and had Fuches feeding him target information and handling logistics. The critical difference between these 2 methods is this. Dexter built a machine that requires weeks of preparation before it could run. Barry ran jobs on much shorter timelines, with less research, relying on his ability to adapt in the moment. Against each other, that difference creates a specific problem for Barry. Dexter's preparation phase, the weeks of watching someone before making a move, is not something Barry's previous handlers, Chechen mob bosses, or criminal rivals ever used against him. They came at Barry with speed and force. Dexter does not work that way. Dexter's method may be unusually effective against an unstable target like Barry. The preparation window is harder to build against a man who does not keep a stable routine, but it exists. Barry's method is faster and more direct, with superior weapons capability. In pure execution, Barry is more dangerous in the moment. Dexter is more dangerous over time. What that preparation actually runs up against is the next piece of this, because Barry is not a clean target, and the reasons why are going to matter. Dexter's cover is one of the most well-built in television history. Barry's cover relied far more on circumstance than planning. Dexter Morgan worked inside Miami Metro Homicide Department for 8 seasons. He was surrounded by professional detectives whose entire job was to find killers. Sergeant James Stokes suspected him for years and could never prove it. Frank Lundy, one of the FBI's most experienced serial killer hunters, ran the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, and here is Dexter's single greatest accomplishment. He survived that entire investigation while being the very serial killer the FBI was hunting. The evidence trail Dexter left never assembled into a complete picture. Lieutenant Maria LaGuerta reopened the blood slide case in season 7 and came closer than anyone before her. The cover held. It held because Dexter built it deliberately, maintained it deliberately, and used his forensic knowledge to stay exactly one step ahead of what the department could actually prove. Barry Berkman's cover was never built that way. He came to Los Angeles in season 1 as a hitman doing a job for the Chechen mob, stumbled into Gene Cousineau's acting class while following his target, and decided he wanted to stay. From that point on, his cover was not a structure, it It was a collection of people who knew too much and a series of very close calls. Detective Janice Moss was investigating the murder of Ryan Madison, the very job that brought Barry to Los Angeles. She was also dating his acting teacher. She eventually connected the dots and tried to arrest him. Barry killed her in the woods at the end of season 1. That is not how a cover is supposed to work. A cover is supposed to stop people from connecting dots. Barry's approach was to kill the person after they have already connected them. Fuchs, his handler, knew everything about every job going back years. Fuchs spent significant portions of season 2 and 3 actively trying to destroy Barry by exposing him to Gene, to law enforcement, and to anyone who would listen. By the end of season 3, Barry was arrested. He escaped from prison, went on the run with Sally and their son, and lived in hiding for years before returning to Los Angeles and getting shot dead by Gene Cousineau. Now, here is where this cuts the other way. Because Barry being a known killer and a wanted man means Dexter's preparation phase has more to work with. Assuming Dexter has access to law enforcement information regarding Barry, he could track the patterns Barry crime scenes left behind and monitor what those records revealed about Barry's known movement. Barry's messy operating style, the fact that he left bodies and evidence trails, is actually useful data for a patient analyst building a picture. Dexter's cover is a real asset. Barry's cover was fragile from the beginning and collapsed before the show ended. For Dexter going after Barry, the lack of a strong cover on Barry's side means more information is available, not less. The cover is only half the picture though. What each man can actually do when a situation goes sideways is where this comparison gets uncomfortable for one of them. If this kind of breakdown is what you came here for, subscribe. We go further into these comparisons than most channels try. Dexter has proven he can handle himself when a plan falls apart. Barry Berkman is a different category of problem, and the gap between them and a direct fight is not close. Dexter is not helpless in the physical sense. He beat James Dokes across multiple confrontations in season 2. He overpowered Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, who was one of the most physically imposing antagonists in the show's run. He killed Oliver Saxon in season 8 with a pen in a hospital room with a correctional officer standing outside. Dexter has shown real ability to adapt when his plans break down mid-execution. He is not someone who falls apart the moment conditions change. Barry Berkman is in a different class physically. The show establishes early on that he demonstrated near-impossible marksmanship in Afghanistan, shooting a target at several hundred yards, a feat that impressed an entire group of trained Marines. His rifle expert and pistol expert badges are shown in his display case. In season 2, he and Fuchs were sent to do a job on a martial arts instructor named Ronnie and his daughter Lily, and that encounter went terribly wrong in a way that required Barry to survive a prolonged, violent, and chaotic fight before walking out. And well, he did. His durability across 4 seasons of increasingly violent situations is significant. Barry's single greatest combat performance in the series was his attack on the Chechen monastery, where he fought through numerous armed opponents in a prolonged gunfight and came out the other side. That sequence establishes something important about what Barry is capable of when he is fully committed. Not just capable of killing one person under the right conditions, but capable of working through a room full of trained, armed men. The show also makes something clear about Barry that matters here. His PTSD causes dissociative rages. When something triggers him, he does not slow down and reassess. He accelerates. His emotional instability destroyed his life across 4 seasons, but in a sudden violent confrontation, that same quality makes him more dangerous in the short term, not less. Dexter's entire system was designed so that this physical gap never became the deciding factor. The sedative exists precisely because Dexter did not want to find out what happened if someone like this was awake and aware when he closed the distance. The kill room exists so there is no fight. The preparation phase exists so the target never sees him coming. The problem with Barry specifically is that Barry's military background may make surprise approaches more difficult than against Dexter's usual target. Few of Dexter's major targets possess Barry's level of military training, and that difference creates a narrower window for Dexter to operate in. In open physical confrontation, Barry wins. The gap in firearm skill, military experience, and demonstrated combat performance is simply too large for Dexter to overcome in an open confrontation. Dexter's system was designed to avoid that outcome. Whether it can avoid it against a target with Barry's specific background is the real question, and it's not a comfortable one for Dexter. Both men have rules they operate by. And in this matchup, those rules do not weigh the same. Dexter's Code of Harry required research, verification, and a controlled execution. Barry had a code too, but his broke down under emotional pressure in ways that created unpredictable, dangerous behavior. That unpredictability is a problem for Dexter's system specifically. Harry Morgan built Dexter's code around specific rules. Only kill murderers who escape justice. Never leave evidence. Never let anyone get close enough to expose the cover. Every kill had to be researched, confirmed, and executed under controlled condition. The code kept Dexter's behavior consistent enough to manage the enormous risk of operating inside a police department for 8 years. It was not just morality, it was a survival structure. Does Barry qualify under the code? The case is real. He killed people for years. He operated outside the law for years. He spent season 1 convinced that Fuchs only ever sent him after bad people, which turned out to be a lie Fuchs had been telling him from the beginning. Once Barry understood that his targets had not always been guilty of anything, his moral framework started to collapse. He killed Detective Janice Moss to protect himself. He killed people who had done nothing to him simply because they were present. By seasons 3 and 4, he was killing to protect his own interest in ways that had nothing to do with justice. The code requires Dexter to verify before acting. That verification takes time. And Barry, unlike most of Dexter's previous targets, does not have a stable enough pattern to observe safely for weeks at a time. He moved around. He did not have a predictable home or work schedule. He lived out of changing location. Building the research file Dexter needed on someone like Barry was going to take longer, and in that time, Barry's own chaotic operating style could generate unexpected collision. Barry's code, such as it was rooted in the story Fuchs told him, that he only killed bad people. Once that story fell apart, what replaced it was not a new moral structure. It was emotional decision-making. Barry repeatedly made irrational decisions because of his attachment to Jean Cousineau. He killed people to protect Sally. He killed people to protect his son. Those motivations are human and understandable in a dramatic sense. In a tactical sense, they make Barry harder to predict, because his decisions were driven by who he loved and how scared he was, not by a fixed set of rules. Dexter's code slows him down. Barry's lack of a fixed code makes him harder to model. Both of those things are true at the same time, and they work in opposite directions. The code is an asset and a constraint together. Dexter needed more time to verify Barry than he would have needed for a simpler target. Barry's emotional unpredictability made him harder to map. Neither is fatal to Dexter's approach, but both shrink the margin. Now, drop a comment below. Does Dexter get the sedative in before Barry detects him, or does Barry clock the approach first? Make the case. Dexter's preparation advantage is real. The forensic access is real. The patience is something Barry's enemies almost never brought to a fight with him. And none of that changes the fact that Barry's emotional chaos is the most dangerous variable in this entire matchup. Every criminal organization that came after Barry in the HBO series, the Chechens, the Bolivians, the people Fuchs set against him, came with speed and force. They knew he was dangerous. They came anyway. They lost. The one consistent feature of every person who tried to take Barry down is that none of them built a picture of him before moving. None of them spent weeks watching his patterns, understanding his safe house, or learning his emotional triggers. They hit first and hoped. Dexter has never worked that way. Against Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, he spent weeks mapping Mitchell's life before making a move. He tracked specific days, specific routine, specific window. The preparation was the method. The execution was almost secondary. Against Miguel Prado, same thing. The research told him exactly when and where to move. Dexter's opponents never knew that phase was happening, because by the time they were aware of Dexter, the picture was already built. Against Barry, building that picture is genuinely harder. Barry did not have a stable routine. His known associates kept changing. He was emotionally redactive in ways that made his movements less predictable week to week. But he did have patterns. He returned to Jean Cousineau repeatedly across 4 seasons, even when Jean wanted him gone. He was protective of Sally to the point where it affected every decision he made. He had an old Marine colleague named Albert Wynn who remained in his orbit. Assuming Dexter has access to law enforcement information regarding Barry, those anchor points could be tracked over time. Here's the variable that cuts deepest. Barry's emotional instability eventually got him killed. Not by a better hitman, not by law enforcement, by Jean Cousineau, his own acting teacher, with a revolver in a confrontation that happened because Barry made an emotional decision to walk back into that situation instead of staying gone. That is not the outcome a trained professional hitman should have. It happened because Barry's code had completely broken down by the end of the show, and without a code, his decisions stopped being tactical and started being personal. Dexter's system was built for personal. He understood how emotions created vulnerabilities in target. He had 8 seasons of using people's attachments, routines, and blind spots against them. Barry's blind spots, Sally, Gene, his son, were well documented by the time the show ended. Against a prepared Dexter, those anchor points become the map. The preparation advantage is real, and it is meaningful. It runs under tighter time pressure than Dexter has faced before. Barry's emotional unpredictability is his most dangerous quality, and also his most exploitable one. Both of those things matter. The series strongly implies a very large body count accumulated over years of contract killing, a Marine Corps background with expert marksmanship certifications, hand-to-hand training, and a combat record from Afghanistan. Barry Berkman was a genuinely dangerous man, lethal at range, capable up close, and trained in ways that made approaching him harder than approaching Dexter's usual targets. Dexter Morgan was something Barry almost never faced, a patient, methodical hunter with access to law enforcement resources, 8 years of operational experience inside a homicide department, and a system designed specifically to make sure a physical confrontation never happened. Barry's path to winning this runs through speed. If he detects the approach early, which his military background makes more possible than with Dexter's usual targets, and forces the confrontation into the open before Dexter can close, the outcome is not good for Dexter. Barry is physically more dangerous. Barry is more experienced in open violent confrontation. The gap in firearm skill, military experience, and demonstrated combat performance is simply too large for Dexter to overcome in an open fight. Dexter's path to winning runs through what it always ran: preparation. Barry's anchor points, his emotional attachment to specific people, are documentable. His patterns around Gene Cousineau, Sally, and Albert Wynn create observable behavior even without a stable home address. His crime scenes, which he left across multiple seasons, fed directly into law enforcement records. The research phase is harder than anything in 8 seasons of the show, but it is not impossible. The difference between these two men is not who is more dangerous in a fight. Barry wins that. The difference is that Barry's emotional chaos got him killed by his own acting teacher. Dexter, across 8 seasons of pressure from FBI agents, homicide detectives, and serial killers who wanted him dead, did not make that kind of mistake until the very end. The discipline gap is real. Barry Berkman wins more in a direct confrontation. When Dexter gets the preparation window, controls the environment, and closes the gap on his term, Barry joins the list. If this breakdown changed how you see either one of these characters, subscribe and hit the bell. The next one goes even deeper into what happens when the wrong kind of killer meets the wrong kind of threat.